We are looking at table principle number 7. And like the other principles, we're asking the same question. How can we intentionally grow, protect, and represent this principle on our teams and in our organizations so that we can grow a culture and we can grow and develop environments where people want to come, where they want to stay, where they want to bring their best, and to do that by design and not default. So principle 7 is this: ask rather than assume. If you must assume, assume the best. This is one of those practices that can be extremely destructive in organizations. When we make assumptions about people, one of the things that we have to remember is that we don't know the whole story. This can also be extremely painful for somebody who is being assumed about. So what can happen is we can have this destruction coming from somebody who is assuming the worst in somebody else, but then the person who is being assumed about also has an experience. If left unchecked, this will spread, and it will spread fast. And I will tell you that it is one of the most debilitating things that teams can start to experience because it erodes trust. If it is not given attention, it will sabotage a team's ability to work collectively, to have significant levels of engagement, and there is no way, it is extremely difficult to create a table of trust where people can show up transparent and authentic and curious when there is assuming happening, and when that assuming is assuming the worst. So what can we do about it? There's a couple of things. One is we have to remind ourselves that assumptions are limited. Like I mentioned just a few minutes ago, assumptions don't give us the whole picture. We don't have the whole picture when we are making assumptions. And sometimes even if we make a good assumption about something, we don't have the whole picture about it. But especially when we're focusing in on assuming the worst, we don't have the full context of what's happening behind that person's behavior, their decision, their tone of voice, whatever it is. The second thing that we can do is we can ask questions. We can go directly to the person that we have those assumptions regarding and ask to have a clarifying conversation where you can look to gain some understanding of the intent of that person's behavior or decision. That takes bravery and courage. But what it does is it stops the assuming and it moves into clarifying. And something that I will say often is that clarity is kind. When we're clear about things, that's kind. And so as we move from assumptions into clarity, it's actually creating a kind environment for people to work together in. Here's some culture questions for us to explore. Are there any negative assumptions that you're making about a team member right now? Are there any negative assumptions that you have about another person because you heard it from somebody else? So it's almost a second-hand assumption. Have you taken the steps to have a clarifying conversation? Have you been willing, or are you willing, to have a clarifying conversation so that you can better understand where that person is coming from? You don't have to agree necessarily, but have better understanding of their intent. If you aren't sure where to start with that, I want to encourage you to visit my website and be able to look under the resources, because there's a tool called Crucial Conversations, and it's a simple sheet that you can work through to start to practice out what that crucial conversation might look like. And you can even bring it into the conversation with you to be able to help guide and keep you on track with that, especially if you're feeling a little bit more nervous about this conversation. But I will tell you, as you step in to have those crucial conversations and are brave enough to do that, the trust is going to grow, People are going to respect the fact that you're willing to have conversations versus spending resources and time around assumptions. The final question I want to ask is, how can you influence to minimize assumptions on your teams and in your organizations? What are specific things that you can commit yourself to that will help to minimize assumptions? It may simply be that when somebody comes to you and starts a conversation regarding another team member or a leader in the organization, you respectfully ask, do you know that information to be true? And then maybe ask them, are you willing to have a conversation to clarify that? You see, what's going to likely happen is it will just stop the conversation at that point. And that would be a beautiful example of you protecting this principle on behalf of your team. So as you reflect on this, let's remember that we can, in assuming the best in one another, means that when we don't have understanding, we just simply go and ask. We ask more questions respectfully. We seek for understanding and clarity, and that's kind. So let's practice assuming the best and see what happens to our environments and our work cultures as we do that.